Well, it's getting harder for me to show up to read these because it's getting so sad. I'm not looking forward to Johnson's death and the book finally being over. But read I must. So we're in the middle of Johnson's letters to Sir Joshua Reynolds. September 2nd. I am glad that a little favor from the court has intercepted your furious purposes. I could not in any case have approved such public violence or of resentment, and should have considered any who encouraged it as rather seeking sport for themselves than honor for you. Resentment gratifies him who intended an injury, and pains him unjustly who did not intend it. But all this is now superfluous. I still continue, by God's mercy, to mend. My breath is easier, my nights are quieter, and my legs are less in bulk and stronger in use. I have, however, yet a great deal to overcome before I can yet attain even an old man's health. Do write to me now and then. We are now old acquaintance, and perhaps few people have lived so much and so long together with less cause of complaint on either side. The retrospection of this is very pleasant, and I hope we shall never think on each other with less kindness. September 9th. I could not answer your letter before this day because I went on the 6th to Chatsworth and did not come back till the post was gone. Many words, I hope, are not necessary between you and me to convince you what gratitude is excited in my heart by the Chancellor's liberality and your kind offices. I did not indeed expect that what was asked by the Chancellor would have been refused, but since it has, we will not tell that anything has been asked. I think that was asking for money for Johnson to go to Italy or something. Is that what they're talking about? I have enclosed a letter to the Chancellor, which, when you have read it, you will be pleased to seal with a head or other general seal and convey it to him. I'm getting deja vu. I think he told that to somebody else, too. Had I sent it directly to him, I should have seemed to overlook the favor of your intervention. My last letter told you of my advance in health, which I think, in the whole, still continues. Of the hydropic tumor, there is now very little appearance. The asthma is much less troublesome and seems to remit something day after day. I do not despair of supporting an English writer. At Chatsworth, I met young Mr. Burke, who led me very commodiously into conversation with the Duke and Duchess. We had a very good morning. The dinner was public. September 18th. I flattered myself that this week would have given me a letter from you, but none has come. Write to me now and then, but direct your next to Lichfield. I think and I hope, am sure that I still grow better. I have sometimes good nights, but am still in my legs weak, but so much mended that I go to Lichfield in hope of being able to pay my visits on foot, for there are no coaches. I have 3 letters this day, all about the balloon. I could have been content with 1. Do not write about the balloon. Whatever else you may think proper to say. Enough about the balloon. October 2nd. I am always proud of your approbation, and therefore was much pleased that you liked my letter. When you copied it, you invaded the Chancellor's right rather than mine. The refusal I did not expect, but I had never thought much about it, for I doubted whether the Chancellor had so much tenderness for me as to ask. He, being keeper of the king's conscience, ought not to be supposed capable of an improper petition. All is not gold that glitters, as we have often been told, and the adage is verified in your place in my favor. But if what happens does not make us richer, we must bid it welcome if it makes us wiser. I do not at present grow better, nor much worse. My hopes, however, are somewhat abated, and a very great loss is a loss of hope, but I struggle on as I can. Now, a letter to Mr. John Nichols from Lickfield. I hope I don't even know if I've been pronouncing that right this whole time. It might be Leichfeld. October 20th. When you were here, you were pleased, as I am told, to think my absence an inconvenience. I should certainly have been very glad to give so skillful a lover of antiquities any information about my native place, of which, however, I know not much, and have reason to believe that not much is known. Though I have not given you any amusement, I have received amusement from you. At Ashbourne, where I had very little company, I had the luck to borrow Mr. Bowyer's Life, a book so full of contemporary history that a literary man must find some of his old friends. I thought that I could, now and then, have told you some hints worth your notice, and perhaps we may talk a life over. I hope we shall be much together. You must now be to me what you were before, and what dear Mr. Allen was besides. He was taken unexpectedly away, but I think he was a very good man. I have made little progress in recovery. I am very weak and very sleepless, but I live on in hope. There's X's at the bottom of this page. I don't know what that means. I don't know if it's a typo. See those X's? I don't know what that's all about. I guess that's, then there's a commentary here from Boswell. This various massive correspondence, which I have thus brought together, is valuable, both as an addition to the store which the public already has of Johnson's writings, and as exhibiting a genuine and noble specimen of vigor and vivacity of mind, which neither age nor sickness could impair or diminish. It may be observed that his writing in every way, whether for the public or privately to his friends, was by fits and starts, for we see frequently that many letters are written on the same day. When he had once overcome his aversion to begin, he was, I suppose, desirous to go on, in order to relieve his mind from the uneasy reflection of delaying what he ought to do. While in the country, notwithstanding the accumulation of illness which he endured, his mind did not lose its powers. He translated an ode of Horace, which is printed in his works, and composed several prayers. I shall insert one of them, which is so wise and energetic, so philosophical and so pious, that I doubt not of its affording consolation to many a sincere Christian when in a state of mind to which I believe the best are sometimes liable. And then here's, I guess this is it. Against inquisitive and perplexing thoughts. O Lord, my maker and protector, who has graciously sent me into this world to work out my salvation, enable me to drive from me all such unquiet and perplexing thoughts as may mislead or hinder me in the practice of those duties which thou hast required. When I behold the works of thy hands and consider the course of thy providence, give me grace always to remember that thy thoughts are not my thoughts, nor thy way my ways. And while it shall please thee to continue me in this world, where much is to be done and little to be known, teach me by thy Holy Spirit to withdraw my mind from unprofitable and dangerous inquiries, from difficulties vainly curious, and doubts impossible to be solved. Let me rejoice in the light which thou hast imparted. Let me serve thee with active zeal and humble confidence, and wait with patient expectation for the time in which the soul which thou receivest shall be satisfied with knowledge. Grant this, O Lord, for Jesus Christ's sake. Amen. And here I am enabled fully to refute a very unjust reflection by Sir John Hawkins, both against Dr. Johnson and his faithful servant, Mr. Francis Barber, as if both of them had been guilty or culpable neglect towards a person of the name of Healy, whom Sir John chooses to call a relation of Dr. Johnson's. The fact is that Mr. Healy was not his relation. He had indeed been married to one of his cousins, but she had died without having children, and he had married another woman, so that even the slight connection which they once had been by alliance was dissolved. Dr. Johnson, who had shown very great liberality to this man while his first wife was alive, as his appeared in a former part of this work, see page 377. I'm not going to do that, but we'll just pretend it's there. It probably is. Was humane and charitable enough to continue his bounty to him occasionally, but surely there was no strong call of duty upon him or upon his legatee to do more. The following letter, obligingly communicated to me by Mr. Andrew Strahan, will confirm what I have stated. To Mr. Healy, number 5, in Pye Street, Westminster. Sir, as necessity obliges you to call so soon again upon me, you should at least have told the smallest sum that will supply your present want. You cannot suppose that I have much to spare. 2 guineas is as much as you ought to be behind with your creditor. If you wait on Mr. Strahan in New Street, Fetter Lane, or in his absence on Mr. Andrew Strahan, show this, by which they are entreated to advance you 2 guineas, and to keep this as a voucher. I am, sir, your humble servant, Ashburn, August 12, 1784, Sam Johnson. Excuse me. Indeed, it is very necessary to keep in mind that Sir Joshua Hawkins has unaccountably viewed Johnson's character and conduct in almost every particular with an unhappy prejudice. I shall add one instance only to those which I have thought it incumbent on me to point out. Talking of Mr. Garrick's having signified his willingness to let Johnson have the loan of any of his books to assist him in his edition of Shakespeare, see page 493, Sir John says on page 444, Mr. Garrick knew not what risque he ran. Risk. They spell it like risque, though. R-I-S-Q-E. Mr. Garrick knew not what risk he ran by this offer. Johnson had so strange a forgetfulness of obligations of this sort that few who lent him books ever saw them again. This surely conveys a most unfavorable insinuation, and has been so understood. Sir John mentions the single case of a curious edition of Paulician, see page 65 of this book, which he tells us appeared to belong to Pembroke College, and which probably had been considered by Johnson as his own for upwards of 50 years. Would it not be fairer to consider this as an inadvertence and draw no general inference? Inadvertence and draw no general inference? The truth is that Johnson was so attentive that in one of his manuscripts in my possession, he had marked in 2 columns books borrowed and books lent. This footnote goes on, so give me a second here. In Sir John Hawkins's compilation, there are, however, some passages concerning Johnson which have unquestionable merit. One of them I shall transcribe in justice to a writer whom I have had too much occasion to censor, and to show my fairness as the biographer of my illustrious friend. Quoting now. There was wanting in his conduct and behavior that dignity which results from a regular and orderly course of action, and by an irresistible power commands esteem. He could not be said to be a staid man, nor so to have adjusted in his mind the balance of reason and passion, as to give occasion to say what may be observed of some men, that all they do is just fit and right. I guess that should have been, all they do is just fit and right, not just fit and right. But that's from Hawkins's Johnson, page 409. Yet a judicious friend, probably Malone, well suggests, it might, however, have been added that such men are often merely just and rigidly correct, while their hearts are cold and unfeeling, and that Johnson's virtues were of a much higher tone than those of the staid, orderly man here described. Okay, so kind of makes up for Hawkins there after 1,300 pages. We now behold Johnson for the last time in his native city, for which he had ever retained a warm affection, and which, by a sudden apostrophe under the word licked, he introduces with reverence into his immortal work, the English Dictionary, Salve Magna Parens. Hail, Great Mother, from Virgil's Georgics. I'll read this footnote for this. The following circumstance, mutually to the honor of Johnson and the corporation of his native city, has been communicated to me by the Reverend Dr. Weiss from the town clerk. Quote, Mr. Simpson has now before him a record of the respect and veneration which the corporation of Lichfield in the year 1767 had for the merits and learning of Dr. Johnson. His father built the corner house in the marketplace, the two fronts of which, towards Market and Bread Market Street, stood upon wasteland of the corporation under a 40-year lease, which was then expired. On the 15th of August, 1767, at a common hall of the bailiffs and citizens, it was ordered, and that without any solicitation, that a lease should be granted to Samuel Johnson, Doctor of Laws, of the encroachments at his house for the terms of 99 years at the old rent, which was 5 shillings, of which, as town clerk, Mr. Simpson had the honor and pleasure of informing him, and that he was desired to accept it without paying any fine on the occasion, which lease was afterwards granted, and the doctor died possessed of this property. Anyway, while here in Lichfield, he felt a revival of all the tenderness of filial affection, an instance of which appeared in his ordering the gravestone and inscription over Elizabeth Blaney to be substantially and carefully renewed. It was on page 28. We won't go there, though. Oh, no. I'm not going to go back. To Mr. Henry White, a young clergyman with whom he now formed an intimacy, so as to talk to him with great freedom, he mentioned that he could not in general accuse himself of having been an undutiful son. Once, indeed, said he, I was disobedient. I refused to attend my father to Exeter Market. Pride was the source of this rueful, and that remembrance of it was painful. A few years ago, I desired to atone for this fault. I went to Exeter in very bad weather, and stood for a considerable time bareheaded in the rain, on the spot where my father's stall used to stand. In contrition I stood, and I hope the penance was expiatory. Jeez, that's pretty brutal. All right, well, I'm going to stop for now. Won't be long now, though. Until next time, bye from Boswell.